There's a $2 powder at every garden center and farm supply store in this country. It kills every ant, cockroach, and crawling insect that touches it within 48 hours, and it never stops working. Apply it once, and it stays active indefinitely. Insects cannot develop resistance to it because it does not work chemically. It works physically, and you cannot evolve your way around physics. It leaves zero toxic residue. It is completely safe around children, pets, and food. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has approved food-grade versions for direct contact with stored grain intended for human consumption. A bag costs $2, and the $20 billion pest control industry, the exterminators, the spray cans, the bait stations, the quarterly service contracts depends entirely on you never realizing this powder exists. They did not stop using it because it failed. It has never failed once against a crawling insect. They stopped promoting it because it works permanently for $2, and permanently working for $2 cannot fill a service contract. This is the complete story of diatomaceous earth, the fossil powder, the pest control industry buried under synthetic chemistry, and what it means for every cockroach and ant trail in your home right now. Welcome to the Blueprint Secrets. This is where we open the vaults that billion-dollar industries need permanently shut. If this knowledge matters to you, subscribe and hit the bell right now. Every vault we crack open, you will be the first inside. Let me take you back thousands of years to the first grain storage pits of the ancient world. Farmers are facing a problem that will stay with agriculture until today. You grow the grain. You dry it. You store it. And then the insects find it. Weevils, grain beetles, storage moths, they move in, and what should feed a community through winter becomes inedible within months. Early farmers tried everything. Sealed clay vessels, smoke, dried herbs packed between grain layers, none worked completely. Then someone noticed that grain stored in certain rocky, chalky soil stayed insect-free. Not because the soil was toxic, because something in the fine white dust coating those areas was lethal to insects while being completely harmless to the farmers handling it daily. That white dust was diatomaceous earth, the fossilized skeletal remains of diatoms, microscopic single-celled algae that built their cell walls from silica and left those shells behind in enormous geological deposits. Ancient storage workers observed the effect, collected the pale, chalky material from riverbeds and dry lake beds, and incorporated it into their practices for thousands of years. The formal scientific documentation came in 1926, when researcher W.H. Hess published the first systematic study confirming the ancient observation. The material was lethal to insects and harmless to mammals. Simple, available, permanent. Then synthetic chemistry arrived. DDT in 1939, organophosphates in the 1940s, pyrethroids in the 1970s, each generation worth billions to the companies manufacturing it. Diatomaceous earth, which cost almost nothing to process and could not be owned by anyone, was never going to compete against a branded spray can with a quarterly service contract attached. Here is exactly what diatomaceous earth does to an insect, and why no crawling pest can ever develop resistance to it. Every insect has a waxy outer layer coating its exoskeleton called the cuticle lipid layer. Its function is water retention. Insects are small. Their surface area relative to body volume is enormous. Without that waxy coating, they lose moisture through their surface at a rate that kills them within hours. The cuticle lipid layer is what stands between every crawling insect and fatal dehydration. Diatomaceous earth destroys that layer. The fossilized silica shells of diatoms are microscopically sharp, not sharp enough to cut human skin, but sharp enough to score the cuticle lipid layer of an insect exoskeleton on contact. As an insect walks through diatomaceous earth, the particles adhere to and physically damage that protective coating. The insect begins losing moisture immediately. Within 24 to 48 hours, it dies from dehydration. This is a purely physical process. No chemical toxin, no nerve agent, no disrupted enzyme pathway, just abrasion and desiccation. This is why insects cannot develop resistance. Chemical resistance develops when a genetic mutation reduces sensitivity to a compound, survivors reproduce, and the resistant trait spreads. You cannot develop resistance to having your moisture barrier scraped off. The physics does not change. A 2008 review in the Journal of Insect Science confirmed diatomaceous earth efficacy against 14 species of stored product insects with zero resistance development across repeated exposure studies. Every insect that walks through it dies, every time, without exception. That is not a marketing claim. That is basic physics confirmed in peer-reviewed research. Now look at the numbers. The pest control industry counts on you never examining. The global pest control market is valued at over $20 billion per year. The residential service industry in the United States alone generates approximately $8 billion annually. The average household using professional pest control pays $400 to $700 per year for quarterly visits. Each visit involves spraying synthetic pyrethroid compounds around the home perimeter. Those compounds break down in sunlight and moisture within weeks. The insects return. The technician returns. The bill arrives again. Synthetic pesticides are designed with a half-life, not because a longer-lasting compound cannot be made, because a compound that breaks down in 6 weeks requires 6 more weeks of service revenue. Diatomaceous earth does not break down. It does not evaporate. It does not lose potency. A correctly applied barrier remains effective against crawling insects for as long as it stays dry. One application, one afternoon. Under $20 in material for a complete home perimeter treatment. You cannot patent fossilized algae shells. You cannot trademark desiccation as a kill mechanism. You cannot build a quarterly service model around something that does not require reapplication. So the industry repositioned it as a niche gardening product, useful for slugs in the vegetable patch, nothing more. Branded pest control products went on hardware store shelves at eye level. Diatomaceous earth went to the garden aisle, labeled for outdoor use, placed where no homeowner with a cockroach problem would ever look. The placement is the suppression. Where a product sits determines what problem consumers believe it solves. This knowledge never left the people who needed permanent solutions rather than recurring contracts. Organic farmers across the United States and Europe use diatomaceous earth as their primary stored grain protectant. The USDA has approved food-grade diatomaceous earth for direct application to grain intended for human consumption. The same government agency approving it for grain you eat has classified every synthetic pyrethroid with varying precautionary restrictions. The comparison is not subtle. The organic gardening community has documented its effectiveness against every crawling pest consistently across decades. Garden forums contain thousands of first-hand accounts from growers who eliminated persistent pest problems with a single application after repeated failures with synthetic alternatives. In 2011, the University of Kentucky College of Agriculture published an extension report on diatomaceous earth for household pest control. The report confirmed effectiveness against cockroaches, ants, silverfish, earwigs, and bedbugs, and recommended food-grade diatomaceous earth as a low-risk alternative to synthetic pesticide application for indoor use. A state university extension service, the type of institution that exists specifically to transfer practical knowledge to the public, published this. It was not covered by any mainstream home improvement publication with pest control advertising revenue. If you have made it this far, you already know more about pest control than 99% of homeowners who have ever signed a quarterly service contract. Subscribe and share this with someone still paying $600 a year for a truck that shows up every 3 months. Everything the industry buried is in the vault. The link is in the description. Stay with me because what comes next is the part they need you to never use. Here is exactly what to do. First, what this works on and what it requires. Diatomaceous earth works on every crawling insect, ants, cockroaches, silverfish, earwigs, bedbugs, fleas, and stored grain pests. It does not work on flying insects in open air because it must contact the exoskeleton directly. It loses effectiveness when wet water temporarily cakes the particles. Once dry, it reactivates completely. Step 1. Buy food-grade diatomaceous earth, not pool-grade. Pool-grade has been heat-treated for filtration systems and is a respiratory hazard indoors. Food-grade is the correct product. Sold at garden centers, farm supply stores, and online. A 4-pound bag costs $8 to $12 and treats an entire home perimeter with material left over. Step 2. For indoor cockroach or ant control, apply a thin layer along baseboards, behind appliances, inside cabinet hinges, under the refrigerator, and along any wall floor junction where insects travel. The layer should be barely visible, not a thick pile. Insects avoid thick, visible barriers and walk through fine dustings without detecting them. Thin is more effective than thick. Step 3. For outdoor perimeter treatment, apply a continuous band around the foundation around all door frames, windowsills, utility penetrations, and any gap where pipes or cables enter the structure. Reapply after heavy rain. Step 4. For stored food protection against pantry moths, grain beetles, and weevils, place a thin layer in the bottom of storage containers before adding grain, flour, rice, or dried legumes. The FDA approval for direct grain contact confirms this is safe for food. Step 5. Wear a dust mask during application. Diatomaceous earth is non-toxic, but it is a fine powder. Inhaling any fine powder in quantity irritates the respiratory system. A simple dust mask during the 5 minutes of application is the only precaution required. Total cost for complete home treatment, under $12 once. No quarterly service visit, no chemical residue, no resistance building in the insect population, no bill arriving every 3 months forever. Ancient grain farmers found this powder in chalky riverbeds and used it to protect their harvests for thousands of years without understanding silica crystal structure or cuticle lipid layers. They understood one thing: the insects died. The grain stayed safe. The people ate. In 1926, a researcher put numbers on what those farmers observed across millennia. Harmless to mammals, lethal to insects, permanent in effect. And then synthetic chemistry arrived with its patents and branded cans and quarterly service routes. And a $2 powder that Diatom spent millions of years building was quietly moved to the garden aisle and relabeled for slugs. The pest control industry did not prove diatomaceous earth wrong. They could not. The physics does not change. An insect walking through it loses its moisture barrier and dies. That has been true since the first diatom built its silica shell in a prehistoric lake. It will be true long after every synthetic pyrethroid ever manufactured has been restricted or banned. The bag is still on the garden center shelf, under $12, food grade. Approved by the FDA, effective against every crawling insect that has ever walked through a home, sitting in the garden section while a pest control truck parks outside your neighbor's house every 3 months. Some knowledge does not die. It just gets moved to the garden aisle. Today you know which aisle that is. If this vault opens something for you, subscribe and share it forward. Every share keeps open what the industry spent decades quietly closing. The next vault opens soon, and what is inside weighs even heavier.